Hello, and we're live again, so welcome everybody. This is the fourth talk series that we've organized in collaboration with UCL and Hobs3D around this exhibition that opened about a month ago at MoCDA, Museum of Contemporary Digital Art. Today we're going to be discussing about what cognitive science can bring to museums and artists, and we have Dr. Mariana Barbarobello moderating this panel today. So I will let Mariana introduce the speakers and the panel topic, and I will invite everybody watching this live talk to share any comments or questions today with us, and we'll pick them up through the conversation. So thank you again. I will be moving backstage and come back towards the end of this talk to talk some more about the exhibition and what's coming up as well at MoCDA. So Mariana, I'll let you introduce the panel and the speakers, and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Serena. Thanks a lot for organizing this series of panels, and thanks to the speakers that we have with us today. So let me just make a quick introduction to the topic of today's panel. So we're going to talk about cognitive science, and cognitive science is a relatively recent discipline. It tries to apply scientific methods in order to understand the mind, the behavior, and the brain in humans, but not only in humans. And while it has naturally developed as a fundamental and basic research field at the lab, we are now seeing increasing interest in taking cognitive science outside of the lab and applying its insights in particular context, for example, in education. And museums and art in general are particularly interesting context as well. And cognitive science has a lot to say in that area. Artistic expression is a very distinctive and old human behavior, and it involves a number of different cognitive processes for the artists, for example, in terms of emotions, creativity, and motor abilities even, but also for the perspective of the viewer. So again, emotions, visual, auditory perception perhaps, and memory, so what you remember from what you've seen. So museums contain a precious source of data for cognitive scientists to understand the human mind. But maybe cognitive scientists can also provide museums and artists with a specific understanding of how the interaction between artworks and viewers can operate. So to discuss potential applications of cognitive sciences to museums and art, it's my pleasure to welcome here today three speakers from around the world, actually. So we have Professor Helmut Leder. Hello. Professor of Psychology at the Department of Basic Psychological Research and Research Methods at the University of Vienna, and also head of the EVA Lab, Empirical Visual and Aesthetics Lab. So his research focuses on the psychology of aesthetics with both empirical and the conceptual approach. We also have Professor Maurice Benayoun, professor in the School of Creative Media at the City University in Hong Kong. Maurice is a new media artist, curator, and theorist, and his work has tried to involve the viewer in different ways, for example, by using brain-computer interfaces. And we have also Dr. Chantal Eschenfelder, who is head of education and digital collection at the Stadel Museum in Frankfurt, and she has been collaborating with cognitive scientists for the last years, and will be telling us about her experience. So, well, I've asked each speaker to prepare just a 10-minute presentation around the topic of today's panel and around each one's work. And afterwards, we will have the opportunity to discuss the topic, and with you in the audience, so you can ask questions and comment on the chat. And so yeah, keep your comments and questions coming throughout. So I'll now ask Professor Helmut Leder to talk to us about his research. Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much. As you've heard, I'm a scientist, so I can't talk without showing images, and therefore I've prepared a few slides. And well, first of all, I want to thank for the invitation to this exciting event, especially to Mariana and Patrick Haggard, but also Serena in the background for organizing this session, Potential Contributions of Cognitive Science for the Future of Museums. So 1 hour is probably very short, and due to my experience with Zoom, I also included a picture of myself. So I'm a psychologist by education, art historian I did as a minor, and I'm generally fascinated by beauty. So about 17 years ago, I had the opportunity to found in Vienna the Visual Empirical Aesthetic Research Lab. I think the first of its kind, which we exclusively study the psychology of aesthetics, but also beauty, cognition, and involved in motions. And it's this fascinating science of how the eye captures light and transforms it in the brain. And from this kind of illustration of distribution of photons in our environment, finally gets a visual representation of our environment. Well, that's only fake, but that's what we are studying. And we are interested in various classes of objects. Typical for cognitive psychologists, we study not only the perception, but also the beauty of people, faces, design objects, of nature, architecture, and especially interest in artworks. And as you said, conceptually, as a background and a framework to our research, we've developed this kind of model, a kind of box model of information flow, typical cognitive scientist stuff, to explain what happens in the mind and brain of a perceiver. And to guide you through this model very quickly, was first published in 2004. It's a lot cited in the field of empirical aesthetics. It tries to explain how we process artworks by claiming that there are perceptual analyses followed by implicit memory integration, so familiarity aspects, then explicit classifications where the perceiver in his perception perceives the style or the content, and then followed by later stages that we call cognitive mastering, trying to find a meaning, trying to see what it actually means for him personally or in an art historical context, and stages of evaluation, which then lead to aesthetic judgments. This is an interesting artwork. This is one artwork I like, but also to a number of various aesthetic emotions that can range from, well, interesting, I like it, to, wow, this is moving, up to even sometimes, rarely in visual art, but sometimes transformative experiences. And we also followed up, we also translated this into neuroscientific research, where we proposed various brain regions and networks that might be responsible for, as you can see on the left, the turned model of aesthetic processing. And for today, I've brought 3 examples to quickly, within this 10-minute slot, give you examples of what the empirical research that we're doing following our model could look like. In the first example, we studied whether art experience can be special in the museum. So what did we do? In this paper by Brieber and Nadal, we studied, so to say, the white cube. You're all probably familiar with Brian O'Doherty's statements of the outside world must not come in. So windows are usually sealed off, walls are painted white, the ceiling becomes a source of light. The art is free, as the saying used to go, to take on its own life. Well, this is a special context. And in this research, we studied the effect of the real artwork in this kind of context in a museum here in Vienna, and compared it to what we usually provide as a context as an older image of our older laboratories, where people sit in front of computer screens and look at art. And for an exhibition here in Vienna, we compared 2 versions, one in which people were in the real museum, in a big room, 1-room exhibition, and looked at the real art. And we somehow simulated the kind of museum on, in this case, big screens, high resolutions, with the same order of artworks, as you can see here, represented on the screen, and you could move back and forth. And we measured for each artwork and for the general experience, how the experience was for a number of visitors. And we found, to make it really short, that art was experienced better. So it was liked better, it was found more interesting, it was also found to be more understandable when people saw the artworks in the museum. So we later also did studies on trying to show what the reason for this might be, but nevertheless, summary of this study, art's better in the museum. My second example, we also found that recall for the artworks was only higher in the museum because somehow people remembered the spatial layout. Something interesting for curators of museum shows that the spatial layout, in this case, clearly helped to later recall a higher number of artworks for those people who saw the artworks first in the museum. Well, my second example, can we also capture the special art experiences of conceptual art in the museum? And this was a study published last year, in which, together with Matthew Pawlowski and other researchers from our team, we studied aesthetic experiences of installation art of an Olafur Eliasson exhibition here in Vienna, Baroque, in which we studied this room, an illusion of a ring against a mirror, and battlefield paintings hang on the wall, and compared this to what you can see on the higher left, the ICU. We equipped people with mobile eye tracking glasses that can capture where people looked at. And after each room, we asked them to fill in comprehensive, large number of questionnaires, post hoc questionnaires after having visited the full exhibition, as you can see illustrated here down in the so-called testing room. And we made a lot of analyses. It's a very long paper, but I only show you one result. So when people reported the experienced emotions they had in these two different rooms, the bright sun-like ICU, or the wishes versus wonder, the ring illusion in the room with the battlefield paintings from very classical paintings, we found in a way predictable differences in the emotional profile that they reported here. Well, I don't use my mouse, but you can see the red stars, little red stars indicating differences. So the ICU was felt as being happier, more amusing. And when you move to the right-hand side, the intention was better understood in the wishes versus wonder, the right-hand room, but it was also in the center, right under the middle illustration, felt more sad, elicited more sad feelings. So these data show differences in participants' emotional states, appraisals, visual exploration, which together paint a picture of aesthetic reactions to the work. And these differences also showed how viewers' appraisal strategies, meaning-making, and physical actions facilitated relatively more or less deep engagement with and enjoyment of the artworks. My third example, effects of beauty from lab to life. So I know that artists and art historians are reluctant to use the word beauty, but in psychology, this is the word to describe many aspects that are related, at least, to aesthetics. And as you see, we also study faces, bodies, landscapes, and so on. So forgive me, but this is an example where we study beauty. We were also involved in Sackmeister and Walsh show here in Vienna on beauty, very disputed show. Probably you know this in Frankfurt, was also there in the Applied Museum. And nevertheless, in our laboratory research, now over years, we found that beauty determines how we perceive the world, because beauty binds looks. And where does this claim come from? When you're exposed to a scene, so this is one of our studies. If you're exposed to a scene depicting two people, different slightly in level of attractiveness, or don't, even if they differ not at all, and we measure eye movements, then the more eye movements people that we can find on a certain object, it's not only true for faces, also other objects, but in faces particularly, here you see the more red, the more eye movements landed in the face of, in this case, the right person. And this is a clear indicator that this person here found more beauty in the right than in the left face. And that's very reliable and often been replicated in our studies here in Vienna. And now we wanted to translate this into real life. And what we did was, in Mitschke's master thesis, we've tested people wearing portable eye movements here along the Donau Canal, the Danube Channel, a big park in the center of Vienna. And we had people walk for 300 meters wearing these glasses that recorded what they saw and where they looked at. Here there were sculptures, but there were also lots of graffiti or wall paintings along this channel, this canal. And here you see a short illustration, 300 meters long they walked. We recorded from each participant what they saw, where they looked at, and then analyzed whether they looked longer, how long they looked at each object on their path in this real life study, the field study. And we found that the beauty ratings that they later gave to the different objects depicted positively linearly correlated with the total fixation duration. So even in everyday life, somehow beauty of an object that is accepted as a category in aesthetics determines how people direct their looks in their everyday life. So beauty binds longer looks. Last slide. So I tried to show you very briefly that art is a topic in series of psychology of aesthetics, that art in the museum somehow is special. It's a big research topic, but a lot of fun to do. Installation art can elicit predictably different responses, and we can capture those, especially when we also use psychophysiology. And beauty determines the way we perceive the world, not only in the lab, but especially, and that's more important, in real life. And we have just, at the moment, we start 2 new big projects sponsored with a lot of money to study art in the real world here in Vienna, where we have small art installations put on the street. And in another EU project, we study the beauty of written text in everyday life when walking through a city like Vienna. Well, thank you very much for your attention. And I now finish sharing my screen. Hope that works. And I'm back.
You are.
Live.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was great. I'll ask now Maurice to tell us a bit about his work and his view on the topic of today's panel. So there's a screen to be shared again, and a microphone to unmute, I think. So keep your questions coming in the audience if you want. I'm sure you've had lots of comments and things you'd like to ask to Helmut and the other speakers, so just write them down.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Talking about so wide topics, you know, unfortunately, I've been crossing different parallel subjects all along my path, and I could take 10 hours to talk about this. So that's a bit embarrassing. So do not hesitate to interrupt me and to stop me if I'm too long. So I will try to go through some slides. I don't know if you see my slides. Do you? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Share screen.
Sounds like and
it should work.
Yes.
Now you see?
Yes.
Okay. I think the problem that there are so many questions in the question that you're asking here that I don't know how to address them separately. So I will try to go through by picking some elements of my practice that refer to that. So in '93, I conceived Art After Museum, which is a contemporary art collection in VR. And I was just wondering how people would discover VR, virtual reality works, and what it means in terms of conception for the artist and in terms of display for the museum, and how this is not anymore a museum. This is about that. So we'll take more questions. In '94, I started working with VR more concretely, with the big questions, and I did a VR work integrating artificial intelligence called more, let's say, more. It's more about neural network. So it was called "Is the Devil Curved?" that followed "Is God Flat?" and people were invited to dig into a world made full of clouds and sky, and to dig corridors in this world. And then they would meet somebody, a creature that would react to their behavior. And most of my work of this time was about trying to understand the behavior of people interacting with an artwork, and the behavior of the artwork trying to understand the people. And so here, this artwork is trying to seduce us because it works like you know, it's a kind of a seductive creature based on 5 spheres, emitting sounds coming from porn movies, and actually trying to capture our attention, to draw our attention, because it works like a TV program, a primetime TV program. And so adapting itself according to how people pay attention to its behavior. And if we are not satisfied, another creature will appear with a different behavior, different combination of spheres, and so on, until we get the best absolute tool to capture the audience. The same year, I did the tunnel under the Atlantic. It was a virtual VR tunnel between the Pompidou Center in Paris and the Museum in Contemporary Art in Montreal for IZEA 1995. And I invited the audience, the public, to dig into a material that was a cultural material. And I wanted the public to react, to express its interest in what it would meet by digging into this material, and talk with the other about what's going on the other side. And the kind of AI was reorganizing the content. It's more a kind of recommendation engine based on the behavior analysis, and paying attention to what seems to be more interesting for you, reorganizing the content, providing better content, and many other things. So that's what the digging was about. And I make it shorter because, so if you dig a lot, it's like digging into memory, as you can see, and then you meet the other on the other side. So the video was floating. So just imagine 95 is the beginning of the web. So this is the first meeting after 5 days of digging with the people 6,000 kilometers away. Matthew, we can see you in Montreal. And the other says, I can see you, you're dressed in red with a white color, which is, of course, the best demonstration of what is the fatigue function of communication that has become dominant in the relation between people at the age of social network. And so this is another work where attention was important, and the audience is invited to use photo cameras and to capture photos from authentic photo from the Second World War and the Bosnia War. So this was presented in Linz, Ars Electronica, and got the Golden Nika in '98. So when you take a photo, what you take is erased from the SAM and is printed out. And so the experience is the appropriation of the content, and at the same time you create ghosts. That means you're erasing, but you're not totally removing the content, which is a memory, the common memory of the war. So it's a group of people in VR environments taking photos and erasing the memory at the same time. I try to make it short. So this is some of the photos people take. And of course, the erased part and the memory that has been hidden becomes a very visible part of the scene. And so sorry, there is a problem with the order of my slides. So this is okay, let's forget about that. I just meant that there are different characters and behaviors in the artwork that create an artwork which is more a society of agents. And the relation with the public is totally different, because this society is trying to survive, and the public is trying to understand the society. So in '97, I conceived this exhibition called New Image, New Network at Cité des Sciences de la Villette in Paris, where all the content was reorganized in real time according to how people pay attention to it. So it was a network exhibition, and people could go on exploring this content online, because a web page was created automatically for them. And this was a augmented reality exhibition inside the Arc de Triomphe that stayed 10 years, has been destroyed 2 years ago by the Yellow Vest. So it took the two floors plus the top of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And this one I presented, not this one specifically, let's forget it, the detail. It's in the Pompidou Center, where I invited the people, the audience, to watch using VR binoculars an exhibition in the south of France, in Avignon, called La Beauté, Beauty. And so they were watching, and by watching, they were actually painting what I call the collective retinal memory. And so they were adding different kind of contents, mixing them, and maybe giving the priority to some topics. What I did again in China in 2005 with Cosmopolis, where I invited the people from Shanghai, Chongqing, Chengdu, and Beijing to watch cities from around the world, and to create by the collective retinal memory another kind of city that is a cosmopolis that reached something like 10,000 visitors a day, every day. So I tried to make it short. More recently, and still on display in the CTU gallery, there is this, you can see this show with Hong Kong escape views, which are 360 panoramic videos, where by watching with VR binoculars, you create a new palimpsest that includes your experience of watching and the experience of different people around the world. And of course, an important thing I'm working on now is this project called Brain Factory, where I developed the concept, I developed around the idea of the opposition between sublimation and reification. Sublimation considered as the fact that we convert the world into data, and reification that we convert the thought into matter and objects. And so this was first the Brain Factory that you can probably better understand thanks to these short videos, and I hope I have enough time to show you. So the public is invited to use EEG Headband, and this is a show in Taipei, MoCDA Taipei, and they have to give shape to human abstractions and even to human values. So to give shape is not giving shape by designing, but giving shape by assessing the shape. So it's the appreciation of the shape according to a concept, a human concept, that is supposed to give, to lead to something that would fit a wider audience. So from one person to another, they transmit the DNA of the shape, the DNA of concept, that give a collective design of human abstractions and later human values. This is what we talk about. So this was in Gwangju in Korea during IDEA 2019. And at the end of the process, what you have designed, the 3D model, you get a QR code, and you can have it on a wallet, and it's registered on the blockchain. And so you can start trading. So just imagine that you trade happiness, you trade love, anarchy, art, autonomy, peace, purity. You trade them as values becoming value, having a value. And so people can decide by bartering, swapping them, if you want peace and love for power, or if you want something else. So this becomes transactional poetry. And the experience of the visitor is an experience that is actually translated into poetry. That means more ethical statements, and people make choice by giving purity for trust or purity at down, and then later respect, finally pleasure. Or you give money for love, and it becomes something like you always need more money to find love. And so this is automatically generated. And of course, all the data about how much people ask for the values creates a ranking of values according to the culture, to the people. So if you're from Korea, from Taiwan, from UK, from Italy, it's different. And so this is a periodic table of values where the values are organized in a hierarchy based on how people collect them. And then the values become, of course, words. And this is a calligraphy of values that result from the process of using EEG. And this calligraphy is interpreted or read by the reader. And it's an artificial intelligence that tries to find similarities between the generated shapes and Chinese characters. And of course, an interpreter will try to figure out how the terms and the keywords found by the reader may create sentences that refer to philosophy. Of course, at the end of the process, all these immaterial things may become material. So they become prints like that, but they are reified. So the thought become objects, and they can become clothes where people claim their values. And they can become sculpture and artworks, installations, where people, for example, can convert purity into an inflatable sculpture, or make into marble the footprint of freedom, or the shape with honeycombs, the shape of democracy. And this is a big reificator that converts the thing into concrete. So different works made by my students who try to create reifications out of the project. So just to make it short, if the question is about how the space of the museum, the exhibition, the experience of the exhibition, or the game of the artist, let's say, how it changed, we may say that the visitor here become an artist, and then it becomes a curator, selecting the best shape for a certain concept. Then a collector, because you can have a big collection of VOV tokens on the blockchain, and then an art dealer, because you sell part of your collection to get the best, and a trader. And the works include a society of characters, of agents, like a generator, calligrapher, a printer, reader, interpreter, scientist, analyst, accountant, and poet, and philosopher, and so on. So that's the concept. And just to finish with this little thing I'm working on, which is based on robotic arms, it's an introduction to another project I would like to do, which is called the Cyber Public. And the Cyber Public is robots trying to understand why humans make art.
Okay, that sounds like a great question that we can keep for discussion. Thank you, Maurice, for your beautiful talk. So I'll ask now Chantal to share your screen, I think, and tell us a bit more of what you have been doing at the Stadel Museum in Frankfurt.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. So I try to share my screen, and I hope it works.
I've seen many comments and questions coming, so keep them coming, don't be shy, and we'll try to discuss these topics after.
share. I don't know what happens. But when we tried, it took also some time. Huh?
Yes. Did you find the share button and share screen?
Yeah. I shared the screen and I shared the whole screen, but the share button, which is underneath, I cannot. It's not.
It's not activating. I think perhaps Maurice, if you don't mind, maybe unsharing.
Oh, sorry, I'm still sharing. Oh, I shouldn't. I was reading the comments.
No problem.
Is
So
it
I
okay?
think
Did you get it back?
I try to.
Hear. So perhaps now, Chantal, you can try to.
No, I'm not sharing anymore. So do you still see my screen?
No. I don't
Okay.
see the screen anymore, so it should be. Anything coming?
You see something?
Not yet, no.
I don't understand what happened.
So maybe I think you can.
I try and you take the questions first or something? I don't know.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. Let's do one question that was asked by Patrick Haggard at the beginning. So I think it's rather directed to Helmut, exactly. So people often describe aesthetic experiences as somehow exceptional and transcendent. How should a cognitive model account for this, if at all? I think it also somehow relates to Maurice's work, where you try also to go beyond what people can directly tell about experience. So perhaps Helmut, you have something to answer, and then Maurice, if you want to join as well.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, it's difficult for me to say that aesthetic experiences are exceptional. Maybe they become aesthetic experiences when they are exceptional. I think it's this shift in the quality of the experience that make it an aesthetic experience, and so that's very important. Many of my work have been about the experience of watching and the experience of discovering the world. And how we can reach certain level of not exceptionality, not a kind of magic, but more something meaningful. So what would happen that makes sense from the experience of watching and discovering a certain content? So this is, I think, mostly what I've been working on.
Mm-hmm. So is that something, right, Helmut, that is a part of your models?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for this interesting question. And indeed, if we couldn't somehow explain these exceptional, self-reported, sometimes even transformative states, well, the model would, of course, fail. So from 2004 on, we have developed 3 or 4 stages of this model. And in our latest version, we try to exactly address this question. So sometimes it's beyond just being interested and finding something fascinating, or even finding it something is exceptionally perceptual pleasing. But sometimes you really feel that there is something going on that transforms you. And in order to explain this, we put in some extra boxes that represent schemata that you have when you approach an artwork, and somehow how they interact with your self schema. Is what you see what you expect, and if not, what kind of challenge is it? And do you have a facile experience where you have to leave because the emotion that results from a kind of ambiguity gets too strong? Or is it something where the challenge seems to be possible to overcome, and then suddenly puts you into what Csikszentmihalyi would have called a kind of flow state, even where you sometimes feel you have to do this now and then you transform the schema that you have regarding art or yourself. And if it's about yourself, then it's transformative. I hope that this refers to this. Patrick, I'm very happy to share this paper with you and send it to you afterwards. But of course, this is one of the big excitements, and if there is something special. And we started this kind of research years ago with art historical inspired hypothesis regarding the nature of aesthetic experiences, where we, for example, stated that not like in the Kantian sense that aesthetic experiences are somehow emotional distant. We also find evidence in various studies for this. However, the aesthetic experience is one where certain cognitive features are extended in time. So where you take the time to indulge in perception, thinking, and in this special situation where often you've shown us lots of moving artworks, dynamic artworks, but the classical artwork is something that doesn't change, but what changes is me during the experience. So I go through these different processing stages and step through the artwork. And this allows me to somehow monitor, self-monitor the process of perception, cognition, finding meaning, why is something meaningful, and so on.
Yeah. I was also wondering whether how does your model account for more modern art, where it's not necessarily the aesthetics, but also the concept that is behind the work of art that is important. So how does your model account for that? Is there a different time course, for example, for the aesthetic experience, because you need the interpretation, so you need reading, you need explanation, probably.
Well, to make it short, because we need time for Chantal to share her views as well. Nevertheless, so the model, I think, why was it so successful? Because in a way it was planned to only explain contemporary art. However, psychology of the arts for over a century was so backward looking, always looking at Van Goghs and Impressionist or old style paintings. But in a way, when you read the paper, you realize that we aimed for explaining art of today, or at least the potential of explaining art of today. And one of the limits we had, we can only study artworks, or mostly we can study artworks on computer screens, which is a serious limit compared to several kinds of art. And the Baroque, for example, that I showed you, the Iliasson, was of course a very pleasant cooperation with the museum on these kind of conceptual art, where of course most psychologists would claim, hey, this can never be studied, that's too complex. Well, I think we've shown we can.
Thank you. So I think Chantal is ready now. So we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you. Now, yeah, I think you're muted.
You have to unmute.
You have to unmute. Oh, but now with screen sharing, I'm afraid you don't see our window.
Chantal, you should unmute.
Yeah.
Yes, now we have you.
So, but is still your screen, the screen sharing
Yes.
working?
Yes, it is. Now we just
Great.
get full screen.
Okay.
Let it flow.
Okay, so sorry for the technical problems. I'm very happy to be invited in this very interesting panel, and I just would like to show you some things which we do in Stadel Museum. So we have since several years, again and again, collaborations with neuroscientists. And we try to see aesthetic experiences from two perspectives. First, just to show you, this is the Stadel Museum in Frankfurt. This is the old front, and here you see underneath the little green hill, there's the wing of contemporary art. It's a traditional art museum. We have old masters, modern art, and contemporary art. And yeah, as almost all art museums, we have tried to give our broad and diversified public different kinds of art encounters. And here for this question today, it's divided into individual art experience, guided tours, and of course we have several hands-on workshop offers also. And we also have programs for people with disabilities, different kinds of offers, and different ages. We have collaborations, and also for these kind of offers, we like to have a collaboration with scientists from other disciplines, so we can, at the end, shape our offers in a better way. For example, we have also a program called Art for Life. It is a program for people suffering from cancer. And those groups, they first have a guided tour, and afterwards they are doing practical work in our studio. And we have, this was also a study in collaboration with the Goethe University here in Frankfurt, a program for people suffering from dementia and their families. And also here we have this kind of talk between a guide and the group of dementia patients and the relatives, and afterwards here a collaboration of practical work at the end. And in the study there was proven that most of the patients liked this program very much, and that the living conditions, because they are in families where someone has dementia, is suffering from dementia, there's very often there are tensions between the relatives and the patients. So the living conditions in almost every participant families have been bettered after taking part in the program. And we did in the last 6 years now many steps towards digital offers, not only because of Corona, what we have now, but we were one of the first museums experimenting with the digital strategy. And therefore, we have different offers, also a VR offer in our museum. But for us, it was very important to shape these offers upon certain experiences and on the basis of exchange with scientists of other disciplines. So first of all, before we began to develop our digital offers, we were taking a look back on what are the key features of art education in museums and what is functioning there. So the first thing is the impulse of the original on a non-verbal level by stimulating perception. And then on a second level, you have the conveying information through storytelling and the entertaining performance of the art educator. And on a third level, you have a close interaction between the educator and the visitors in front of the original. The problem is, if you are in the digital realm, that your average attention span is only 8 seconds if nothing interesting happens on your website. So the biggest challenge is how can we keep the user interested over a long period of time? So we developed or we sampled the key features of digital art education, which are multimedia content, and that we offer the macrocosm of art in micro units and a vast content in very, very small units, so it can be easily be understood. And to provide interactive tools and gamification methods, and also to offer a diversified learning environment for a guided self-study. And of course, storytelling is even more important in the digital realm as in the physical space. And very important is also a visual example-based learning. So on this basis, we developed a lot of digital offers, from the digitorials to an art history online course, our VR time machine, and a game for children called Imagoras, and we have a digital collection and much more, just to give you some examples. And on a broader level, we have a research cooperation with the Max Planck Society in general, and in special here in Frankfurt, we have the Max Planck Institute of Empirical Aesthetics. And since a few years now, we have a close collaboration. And in 2018, there was one day of this conference, international conference on neuroaesthetics in the wild, has taken place in the Stadel Museum. And we had a panel where even Helmut Leder was also participating. And we were discussing a little bit the similar questions like today. And this was the beginning of a closer collaboration of the Stadel and the Institute of Empirical Aesthetics in Frankfurt. And on this day also, I don't know if you can see it, the lady in the middle, she's wearing these glasses, these eye-tracking glasses. We had a guided tour in the museum, and the data were collected, what happened in the brain during this guided tour. And this was only one example to look and to bring closer together research in neuroscience and aesthetics, and what happens in a museum or during a museum visit. And what the Institute of Empirical Aesthetics in Frankfurt is interested in is to change the site. So many studies are taken in the, they are not taken in museums, but more in scientific spaces, so not in the wild. So here they want to broaden research more in a real museum environment. And another thing we have in this cooperation with the Max Planck Society, it's called the Gust Commentary. So we invite several scientists from different disciplines, but many neuroscientists, to make a guided tour in front of our artworks, but explaining things in their area, in their discipline. So Elisabeth Binder, as you see above, she was talking about people being suffering from traumata after war or other severe things. Or we had very interesting talk from Moritz Helmstetter. He explained what happens when you are maybe in front of a painting of Cézanne, and Cézanne is just at the beginning or at the frontier of realistic painting and abstract painting. So if he paints a tree, the tree doesn't look like a tree, but human beings are able to recognize this, what he paints, as a tree. And this is very interesting if you compare it with today's level of artistic intelligence, which has a lot of difficulties in recognizing, for example, the Cézanne tree as a tree. So we have different lectures of scientists in this area, and also in this program we would like to intensify our collaboration. And to conclude, we think that museums and art institutions need a lot of more research, like Helmut Leder also talked about, from the perspective of neuroscience in the field of aesthetic experiences, so that we can develop appropriate museum offers. Because we would like to have examined the mental processes of art encounters. So what happens if you are standing in front of an artwork? To see if there's a difference between art experiences with or without museum education. To learn more about deepening the aesthetic experience with creative workshops, and to create a better basis for developing digital offers. And we would like to prove that art encounters support physical and psychological well-being. With this, I would like to end.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting, and it's great to see what kinds of initiatives you've been developing there in Frankfurt. Thank you. So we have many comments and questions from the audience. I'd suggest we pick one question. So perhaps it will appear on the screen. So it's around the topic of interactions and how important it is, or how positive it can be to have an interaction between the public and the art that they are viewing. So for example, for the perspective of the museum, what can you develop as new ways of interacting or engaging with the audience? I think, Maurice, interaction is at the heart of your work, right? Always trying to adapt what the viewer is seeing according to what he's asking for somehow. And Helmut, I was wondering also whether the fact that you can interact with an artwork is going to change somehow the way that you appreciate what you're seeing. So I think maybe we can show the questions on the screen while we try to answer this question of interactivity, maybe as well gamification and on a further level. So perhaps, Chantal, if you want to give us the perspective of the museum on how to engage with the audience.
Mm-hmm. I was very interested in the work of Maurice because we almost use the same model in the analog and the digital way to interact with our audience. For example, if we would like to engage people more with our artworks, we are working with these terms that you mentioned, these emotional terms, like, for example, justice or faith or friendship or something, or anger. We try to bring together what people feel, and that they are invited to make a choice. For example, they have to look in our museum which kind of artwork they think fit to this term, for example. And then there's a debate going on and people discussing because everyone has individual emotions and understanding of emotions. But on the other hand, you have some more objective rules that you can maybe say, this is an artwork which makes you angry and it makes everyone angry. And another artwork is more calm and you can generate discussions. And we are using the same also in some of our digital applications. So I was very interested in your work.
Maurice, I think you're muted. We have the...
I think I have to clarify something. We are not, it's not because we are talking about a museum or an exhibition place that we are talking about the same thing. If we are talking about a place where you exhibit paintings and sculpture, I mean static elements, it's something different in terms of public experience from compared to a place where you can have a dynamic content. And I have to say that I've been working more on places where the content, sound, image, and everything happening could evolve according to the experience of the visitor. So I was describing that in the 90s as organic museum design, where the content is like a living being dialoguing with the public. And this living being reacts not to please, but to like two people talking about a specific topic. And this reaction, this experience would enrich the experience of the visitor, because the visitor has a feeling that it exists for the place. So it's a very specific relation that I've been working on building, you know, and it would be probably confusing to really compare the processes, because we are not talking in this case about what is the experience of discovering. Of course, I've been doing things in a more traditional environment, but always able to introduce the possibility for the space itself to have a form of expression that would reflect the experience of meeting somebody.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Helmut, yes.
Well, thank you very much. There are more and more questions, and they're all interesting, but I try to stick to the ones that we agreed on to discuss. So, we have now come to a stage where we more and more acknowledge that different viewers, of course, bring different things into the museum. So it is educational level interest. It can be the actual motivational state, as already asked by some of our audience questions, wonderfully asked. And we include this, of course, in all our empirical studies. We've developed questionnaires, for example, on art experience and art expertise, on the level of what do I know about art, but also how important is art for me. But we also believe that more and more getting deeper into the motives of the perceiver can help to refine the model, and then to pick the kind of processes that are deemed relevant to create a kind of overwhelming, positive or not so positive experience. At the same time, of course, we're aware that we can have informed experiences where someone teaches us, helps us, and that's what museum also provides these days. They not only present the art to the informed viewer, but they also give information. But this level also has to be carefully chosen. Because we have to respect that the artist's intention might not be fully explained, might not, or taking the magic out of the artwork, the possibility to be surprised and experience and bring in your own experiences into resonance with the artwork. All these sounds very uncognitive scientist, what I'm saying now, but I think we can measure and implement these things also in empirical studies, that this has to be respected. So only one study we've published a few years ago showed that when people with Alzheimer who have very strong distortions of their memory, they can't remember a lot of things, they can't remember that we've measured them for the aesthetics preferences, but they show rather stable aesthetic preferences, which means the aesthetic sense, our feeling of beauty, which is something more abstract, it's not much about knowledge, but that this remains or even persists in states where our memory can be severely distorted. And that's, of course, related to the dementia studies that you do with University in Frankfurt and so on. But very interesting stuff where cognitive sciences can also deliver something that is not trivial. It's not what everyone knows, but it's something new and suddenly boosts a kind of action in the museum.
Sure. So we have another question now on screen. So you mentioned recording emotional responses to artworks. Are you looking at eye tracking, group discussions, or are you also evaluating more comprehensive neurological responses, for example, EEG graphs?
Is it about me?
I think
yeah,
yes.
we use them all. So our range of measures of emotion for a long time was a tricky concept in psychology. So most psychologists will agree. It was not, we were stronger in memory, reaction times of cognitive classification, seeing that there is something, what it is, deciding, and so on. But now we have a tradition of 25 years of measuring emotions. And well, to be honest, for a long time I thought that the best way to capture emotions that people have when looking at an artwork is facial EMG. It's a measurement of the frowning, the negative, or the smiling muscle here in the cheekbones.
Yeah, that was a question that I had.
This is something that allows you to measure the dynamics of an emotional response when you suddenly see something very, very reliably. But we also, of course, at the moment use, we have fMRI in Vienna, we use fNIRS, which allows us to measure less reliable, less detailed, but also portable and real life responses in the brain. We have EEG and so on and so on. And eye movement is only one way, and it's a bit disputed. So what happens if you like something? Eventually your eyes go up a little bit, but it's not so clear how eye tracking can reveal something about our underlying emotions.
I would like to say something about the eye tracking question, because as I've been working a lot with the experience of watching, making photos and using binoculars and telescopes and so on. People ask me why I was not focusing on eye tracking. It's because I know how eye tracking works. Eye tracking is related to some kind of primitive behavior of the brain, which is tracking if there are some possible aggression coming, some predator coming, or some potential prey. And so this action is not always significant regarding to a specific topic, because even if I'm looking at the screen, I may look at what things happen around, and this doesn't say so much about. So this is why I've been focusing on tracking intentional watching. When you have binoculars, you do that. This is intentional. This is not the eye moving. This is watching. And so it's a very different, and the telescope was fantastic for that. The big telescopes I did for the Arc de Triomphe, for the Cosmopolis installation, because really you can really focus on what people look at. And even in that field, if they want to do that, they can, but this becomes noise. That was my perception. I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not gonna say that I'm an expert in my issue. But this is, for me, it's a very important issue, and I'm always happy to share about that, because I'm interested in other understanding, perception, and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting as indirect ways of getting at the experience, right? Not directly asking about the experience, but getting other types of measures underlying the experience. Yeah. So time is running, I'm afraid. So I'll ask each of you if you want to make a final comment about the discussion, the topic, open to you. So perhaps let's start with Maurice, who is unmuted.
Yeah, it's a bit late, but I'm fine. Discussion is interesting.
Thank you. So Chantal, would you like to say some concluding words?
Yeah, I got some. I'm confirmed in going more in this direction to search for collaborations, and I was happy that you brought in the term of magic. We don't have to explain art to death, but we have to keep this magic moment. And maybe we have research who confirms us to leave this space, this imagination space for visitors, for artists, and to get this as a serious thing, because we know that in our world determined by numbers and data, magic moments and feelings are not so considered so on a high level. But maybe this kind of research gives us back this kind of space, which is the creative sphere for both artists, and visitors.
Thank you. Helmut, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I'm very pleased about this. So I'm fascinated by the artworks I saw by Maurice, and I'm also always pleased when I hear what museums already acknowledge about the interaction between science and art. However, when we started 20 years ago, I was so many people said you can't do empirical research in art. This is, well, stick with letters and numbers and color patches. But first technical progress had made so many things possible. So we have better measurements, we have higher quality screens, we have portable stuff we can bring into the museum. And at the same time, especially these days, now some of you might know, I don't know where you all are, but we are in Vienna and we have opened the museum 2 weeks ago. So we can go back to the museum before we can go back to the restaurant, to the hotel, into the sports stadium and so on. And we especially believe that this is the right priority, because the kind of treasures and objects that can serve our well-being, our happiness in a huge variety of levels. It's not just like kicking the Chelsea goal and cheering for a moment, which of course all the visitors makes them happy, but it's something that the child appreciates, and even the person suffering from Alzheimer can have the aesthetic pleasure. So I think the full range of things have not yet been lifted, and I think I'm very pleased that I'm part of this panel where we can present our research, and I hope that this interaction in the long run also has many and a multitude of effects.
Thank you very much. I think it was a really interesting discussion, and it was great to hear all these different points of view, museum artists and scientists, and I hope we will engage in more discussions like this, because it's, I guess, useful for everyone. So perhaps, Serena, you want to say final words about the last panel of the series?
Thank you so much, Mariana. This was wonderful to watch and listen to. So once again, I've learned so much just by listening to all of your comments and experience, and everyone thank you for sharing all the questions and relevant comments as well with us today. So I want to thank you, Mariana, for moderating this wonderful panel session, and Patrick as well for being with us and researching around this topic. I want to also remind everybody that the exhibition is going to be open until the 9th of May on MoCDA. So abstract art in the age of new media, also including the work of Maurice in the exhibition. Please feel free to go ahead, have a browse, and also try the experiment that UCL has put together, because I think it will be extremely fascinating to see what you can remember and how you navigate the space. So these series talks will be available on our YouTube channel, so feel free to rewatch them and share them with your audience. And also to say that we made an NFT poster of the exhibition available to support all the participating artists in the show that you can now collect at MoCDA. This is also a limited edition of 100. So thank you again for being with us today, and enjoy the exhibition. And thank you again, Mariana, for the moderation. And
thank you.
Thank you all. Enjoy. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry,